Hi, everyone. It's Tracy here at TierraCast. Thank you for joining me today. Hopefully, I'm streaming in all the places I'm supposed to be, Facebook and YouTube. Hopefully, you're able to find me. There's a couple comments already. Lorena is saying she hopes she doesn't miss this, and Flo was anticipating our start about a half an hour ago. So we're live now. Should be both on YouTube and Facebook. Let me just check that just real quickly. It looks like things are good on Facebook at any rate so far. And while I'm doing this, we can just wait and give people a couple of minutes to find. Oh, I'm getting security warnings.
Important security message.
That's no good. Hold
on. Your
on.
computer has been locked up. Your IP address was used without your knowledge or consent to visit websites that contains identity theft virus. To unlock the computer, please call support.
Okay, that was clickbait, basically. So let's see. So anyway, Flo and Lorena. Oh, Flo's piping in and Anita's piping in. So apparently things are fine on YouTube. And I'm seeing Patty and Emily and Helena on Facebook. So we're good. Yay. Thank you guys for joining me. March is National Craft Month. So we make jewelry supplies, of course. So we do try to find ways, find crafty ways to use our jewelry supplies. So whether that's with some kind of craft technique like crocheting, or we've had my boss, Sarah, our general manager, is a knitter. Matter of fact, she just came back from a knitting cruise, which I really haven't heard too much of her stories yet, but it sounds like it was amazing. She was on a cruise to maybe in Norway or something, where they were looking at the Northern Lights, and it was just a big group of knitters, and it sounds like it was amazing. So, we have a lot of crafty people at the company, and people who do different things, and we do try to pull that in where we can with jewelry making components. So, anyway, it's National Craft Month, and I thought that these ones would be a good demo because we're using the 2-part epoxy resin in these. And these, we were interested in doing something like that with these new 5-to-1 links, to see how it would work. It's quite a thin space for the resin. But it worked. So we're going to demonstrate that. I'm going to throw, I like to throw some links into you guys. What happened to my links? They all went away. Let me pull them back up. I usually try to prep those before we get started so that I can pull them right up and pop them into the comments when it's makes sense to do so. So let me see if I can find those for you. The link, of course, to the project is already in the description. But I'm putting them in here as well. And then also the link to the collection, our Keep the Faith collection, which is our newest group of components, and what this Cathedral link, the Cathedral 5-to-1 link that we're using, is from that collection. So throwing both of those links in there. There's other stuff that maybe I'll just pop in later as the need comes up. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera so that you guys can kind of see what we need to do, or what we need to gather, I should say, for this project. There is a downloadable project sheet available at that link for the project that I posted a second ago. And it has all of the ingredients that you need. Parts list, I should say. I always tend to use the term ingredients because, I don't know, once upon a time I cooked a lot too, and I just got used to calling a parts list ingredients. So what we need to make these is to make a pair. I'm going to try and stick with that. We need 2 of the Cathedral 5:1 links. We need some of our, what do we call these? I always draw a blank. They're mill-grained SS16 bezels, and they fit crystal flatbacks that are SS16 size, which is just about, I think they're like 4.5 millimeters wide, but you will find them listed as SS16 for the size. That's what size of flatback crystal these little components fit, and they are two-sided. So we actually sell them pre-glued with a clear crystal glued into both sides. I'm using the empty ones. We also sell them empty, and I'm using those ones for this project because I wanted to use different colored crystals. So I'm only gluing the crystals on one side. I could use the pre-glued ones for the clears, at least, if I wanted to just do a clear version. And and I also could glue crystals on both sides. But I just thought one side was enough for this particular project. And I used a variety of colors, so you can see I really was going with this original pair. I was really going for kind of a stained glass kind of thing. We also need some fine chain. Again, all of this is on the part list on the project page. Some fine chain, and you need 2 3-inch strands per earring. And then let's see, what else do we need? We need some eye pins. We need some small charms. We need the new Reina earring posts, which are also part of that. Keep the Faith collection that we just launched. Let's see, got the SS16 flatback crystals. We need some 4 millimeter bicone crystals. So for the for the variation I'm going to do today, I decided to use these emerald green because I used a different color resin tint for the resin. So I decided to go with some emerald 4 millimeter bicone crystals. And then we also need, let's get this out of the way. We also need some 2-part epoxy resin. Now, the ones I happen to have in my stash, in my studio here, is I happen to have the little windows, which is a great product, and it's a 2-to-1. It's a 2-to-1 2-part epoxy resin. I should make a disclaimer right now. I am not a 2-part epoxy resin. If you've seen demos of mine in the past where I've done kind of crafty stuff with resins, I almost always use a UV resin. But in this case, UV resin doesn't mix with colorants as easily as a 2-part epoxy resin does. You can use almost anything to mix up to color a 2-part epoxy resin. You can use a lot of acrylic paints and mica powders and all kinds of fun stuff. I happen to have little windows, which is a 2-to-1. You mix 2 parts of the A and 1 part of the B for this particular brand. We also have ice resin. It was getting a little old, so I didn't want to really try this one, but I think it's a 1-to-1. Part A, part B, equal quantities. If you've used 2-part epoxy resins, or if you haven't, I should say, you really do want to follow the instructions very, very carefully. Really measure carefully, really mix carefully, and that way you get the best results. And I think that's especially important with this project because this is such a kind of flat piece. There's not a lot of, that's not going to be a very thick layer of resin. So you really want to make sure it's going to harden adequately. And so it needs to be well mixed. I already mixed some up because I didn't want you guys to have to sit here and wait for me to mix for 2.5 minutes. So I already mixed mine up. Debbie, you haven't missed much. We've just talked about the parts, the ingredients you need to make this project. We talked about some different 2-part epoxy resins you can use. You can pretty much use whichever jewelry clear epoxy resin that you want. I used for these ones, I mixed up some little windows. And I posted a link to the project up further in the comments, and all of the details are there. So I was just saying that I already pre-mixed some resin, and what I used to tint these, I mixed up a whole bunch, and this has a lot of working time. So, usually it's like an hour for products like this. Of course, you can buy 2-part epoxy adhesives that are much faster drying, but that's not the same kind of thing that you want to be using for this. You want to definitely be using the clear, crystal clear resin for doing picture frames and stuff like that. To tint these, I was also talking earlier about what you can use to tint 2-part epoxy resin, and kind of any acrylic paint will work, or tint mica powders. I've seen people say they've used eyeshadow, just like scoop out a little bit of eyeshadow color and mix it in with your resin. For these ones, I used Vintage's Ultimate Stain. And they also have Ultimate Paint. So these are both a clear acrylic. I'm sorry, not clear. These are all acrylic. Sorry, I'm stumbling over that word. Acrylic products. So this is the paint. It's a little more opaque. This is the stain. I was really intrigued by this one because I thought it might be a little bit more translucent. It turns out that both will do fairly good translucency, but I do think the stain was a little bit more translucent than the paint. I used the paint in this one, and I used the stain in this one. So you can see that you can kind of see through them. And that was the goal with this kind of stained glass approach that I was doing. Now, when I did all these different colors last week, because I wanted to have some different stuff to show. And so when I did that, I used a little palette. I have these glass, technically I think they're for beads, but they also work great for paint and mixed media. And so I had mixed up my resin and then just put little bits in each of these containers, and then dyed and then dropped my stain in for different colors. I don't think I need to do that today because I'm just going to do one example. Another thing that you need to put resin into an open ring type of component is you need some packing tape, clear packing tape. And you can also, there are actually kind of stuck-on products made for working with open resin bezels that you can buy. But I just typically use packing tape. And what I did, I don't know if you caught that, I tore a piece off and then I folded a little edge over so that I have a handle of sorts. And then I just want to kind of press that. It's going to stick to all my other things, so I need to get those out of the way. I really had some fun playing with all the different colors last week when I was making my samples. So I'm just kind of burnishing that down onto this little piece of cardboard because I want that to be really stuck down well. And also something I did in preparation was I cleaned these parts. I just threw them all in a little bit of soapy water and rinsed them a little bit. You don't want to soak them a long time because you have some antiquing on here that you don't want to get damaged. So I just did kind of a quick rinse in soapy water and then rinse them and then let them dry. You could also just wipe them with alcohol. So I did clean them before I'm doing this. Now, since I'm only going to do the one color, I'm just going to take some of this paint and put a drop, maybe 2. There's about a 1/2 ounce of mixed resin in here. And I want to mix slowly because I don't want to stir up a bunch of, I don't want it to agitate it so much that then there's more bubbles than necessary. Because if you've worked with resin, you know that you can get some bubbles if you're not careful. And then it's a matter of mixing until it kind of blends well. And I think this is going to be very little too, not quite enough tint. It's going to be too light. So I'm adding a bit more. And that disclaimer again, I am not a resin expert. So, but there is a whole lot of great content on the internet about working with two-part epoxy resins, about curing them, about what you can use to color them. So there's a whole lot of good stuff out there. We advertise with the Beating Gem, the journal, the online blog, the Beating Gem, and Pearl, the woman who writes that blog, has a great deal of resin content on her blog. So she's a good source. The Little Windows Company probably has a lot of good content. My point being, you should do some research. If you haven't used two-part epoxy resin before, it's worth your time to read and do a little research so that you know you're doing everything right so you get the results you need. I do think that I liked the way the stain, the ultimate stain, blended with the epoxy resin a little bit easier. With the paint, I'm having to really mix it more to get it all blended in. And I'm going to stop there because I could just keep mixing and mixing and mixing and mixing, and we don't have all day. So this is a pretty nice tint. It will still have some translucency. And having this little piece of cardboard is important because I'm going to be able to lift when I'm done filling this up. I'm going to be able to pick this right up and put it someplace safe. So I like to have a little portable card of some kind that that I can move after I've filled up my my bezel, whatever it is that I'm using. Maybe it's cold in here or something. It doesn't seem like it's really mixing as willingly as it did last week. So maybe in this case, our example is going to have a tiny bit of a speckled effect, but you know what? I'm not going to worry about it too much. So now I've got this resin tinted, and I'm just going to drop a little bit in my bezel, and I'm going to wait and kind of let it level a little bit. This is, as we were saying, it's quite a flat little piece, so there's not a lot of depth. But I want enough resin in there, but I don't want it to be domed. But I also don't want it to be too thin. So it's getting there. I'm going a little bit slow just so I don't end up having too much and then having to scoop it off. Maybe I'll tip it a tiny bit to get it to flow. Another plus of having a tiny little work surface for underneath your bezels. So if you haven't agitated it too much, that's probably pretty good. It might be slightly domed, but that will be okay. It's not horrible. It's not a big dome. Hopefully you won't get too many bubbles. If you do, you can just use a toothpick, or in this case, I've got some little wooden stir sticks, and you can kind of fish those bubbles out. And you do want to keep an eye on your piece for maybe 10 minutes or so while it's just kind of settling in. And you're going to watch for those bubbles. And then you're going to get rid of those before it starts setting up. So just keep an eye on it for 10 minutes or so. And then when there's been enough time for you to be watching, and making sure any bubbles have been dealt with. I like to, well, you need to put it someplace safe where it won't be disturbed. And then wherever I put it, I'm going to pop a little plastic something over it so that it's protected from dust and protected from getting disturbed. So that's ready to be set aside to cure. And I need to cure that. Instructions on your 2-part epoxy resin may vary between the brands, but I'm going to let this sit till tomorrow. I'm not even going to touch it again until tomorrow. And I'm just going to set it away someplace safe. And I don't know if you can hear this, but it is also important to use good ventilation when you're working with any adhesives and resins. So I've got a vent table running behind us. I don't know if you can really hear that, but there is a vent running behind me. So that is the resin example. All of these ones are just going to get tucked aside. I'm not going to use these for this demo. I just wanted to make some fun color examples. The next thing I'm going to do, so let's pretend I had a little bit of resin overflow on this one. I can see that I need to peel off the back. A little bit of green on there. So to make my little stained glass design, I really kind of tried different things when I was coming up with this original design. Really, the only thing I found that worked and was easy enough for my purposes was a Sharpie. So I chose a dark gray one, and I played with some different designs, things that I thought would work well within the ring, the shape of the ring here. And this is the one I ended up using over and over. And so you definitely, when you're going to make your design, you want, what I did, this is a good thing to show you. What I did was I had a nice sharp pencil to work with, and I just traced the inside. I didn't think about that part of the demo, but what I did is I just had a piece of paper and I had a nice sharp pencil, and this pencil is not sharp enough, but I just traced around the inside. And then that's going to be a bad example. So then I had my rough shape. It's a little bit smaller, but that's okay. And then I made my little design here. And then what you can do is just set the ring, because this resin's kind of translucent. I can see the design through it. And then now you do need to be careful, because this layer of resin is thin. So it's not rock hard. It's got some slight give. So I want to be very careful when I'm tracing my design onto the back, or one side, not necessarily the back, just one side of the resin piece. And you should practice this, because it's Sharpie, and I suppose technically you could use a water-based pen. That way, if you made mistakes, you could my light's not ideal for this. If you made a mistake or weren't happy with your result, you could clean it off. But with Sharpie, you definitely want to practice. Make sure your pattern is going to go on here the way you want it. And you can see that I'm kind of tracing over the lines more than once so that I get some darkness. And I don't know if you can see this, but there is just a tiny bit of give to this resin. And I'm not sure if that's because it is such a thin layer, or maybe it's because my measurements weren't quite as careful as they should have been. I mean, it seems fine, but there's a tiny bit of a give when I'm drawing on it. So be gentle when you're doing that. So that's it. I've got my little pattern, and I'm actually going to where I drew on it, I'm actually going to put that at the back side. So that, Debbie, I use Vintage's stain. It's a Vintage product. It's called Ultimate Stain. Colorful Soul is the Colorful Soul is the little brand. And it actually doesn't say Vintage anywhere on there, but it is a Vintage product. So just look for Ultimate Stain and or Ultimate Paint. I really do like the translucency of the stain. I think I prefer that for this. So I had already done one of my pieces before when I was setting up the demo. And something else I did, we didn't really talk about this, but we did, but not exactly how to do it, is these little SS16 bezels. I like to use hypo cement for those. And I went ahead and pre-glued all the ones I was going to use today, because again, when you do an adhesive project, it really is best to like glue it and then set it somewhere safe and really walk away. Ideally, maybe not even come back and mess with it until the next day, but at least several hours. So I like hypo cement for our little flat back bezels. And it's a pretty easy little process. Just a little dot of adhesive down in the bezel, and then press that little crystal down in there, and then set them aside and let them dry. That Sharpie is alcohol bead. Can you wipe the resin with alcohol? Emily, I tried that, and you can kind of, but it takes a lot of effort. I used alcohol, and Emily is asking if you can use alcohol to wipe the Sharpie off of the resin if you want to correct it or change it. And I did try that, and it works, but you kind of got to work at it. It really did not come off easily, but you can do it if you need to, make corrections. So again, that was just it was just isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab. All right. So I pre-glued all the crystals I was going to use in this demo. And we need, for the earrings, you need, my work surface is a little messy today. Just so much going on. You need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of the SS16 crystal bezels for each earring. And again, all of these details are on the project page you can download. It has all the correct numbers that you need. And then you need 4, 8, 12, 13 of the little bicone crystals for each earring. So I did a whole bunch of that, that prep work before the demo. And one of the things that you need to do with the little links you make is, if you stick with these little charms, they have what we call an opposed loop. So you got the charm surface facing you, and the loop is kind of perpendicular to the surface of the charm. We call that an opposed loop here. You may find it called something else elsewhere, but here in-house we call it an opposed loop. And then there are also charms that have what we call an inline loop. So you got the surface of your charm, and the loop is in line with that surface. So depending on what kind of charm you're going to use, you may need to take 3 of your little links here and turn the, I use 2 pair of pliers, and I turn the loops so that they're perpendicular to each other. That way, when I attach this charm to that bottom one, it's going to hang facing forward. Now, if you use a charm that has an inline loop, you don't need to do that. All of your little links can just have the loops aligned in line with each other. I hope that all makes sense. I tried to put that information in the instructions, and I hope it's clear. So let's see. Now, where are we? So I did a whole bunch of that prep work earlier. Making the little bicone links is easy. You just need an eye pin and your 4 millimeter crystal bead, when you're doing this, I'm concerned about having all this clutter underneath what I'm trying to show you guys. So let me just throw a mat down. When I'm working with little crystal bicones, I pay a lot of attention to protecting the top of that bead before I bend my wire over to make a simple loop. So if you saw that, I kind of tucked my thumbnail over the top of that bead before I bent the wire over. And these head pins, or these eye pins rather, have quite small loops. So I'm cutting my wire to just maybe a little more than 1/4 inch, 5/16 of an inch. And I'm making just a very small loop using the front end of my plier jaws. Now, the way this one came out, the loops are perpendicular to each other. So that would be perfect for the last one that attaches the charm in this case. So I'm just going to leave that. Oh, no, I already have one done like that. So let's come back here and turn those loops parallel to each other, because that will work higher up. All right. You guys, did I lose you for a second? That was totally me, Debbie. Sorry about that. So I'm not quite sure how far back I lost you guys. So what I was talking about was just connecting these links together, making sure that all my crystals are facing the same, facing towards the front, and making sure that my my loops are nicely closed, so they're all nice and tidy. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. I need one at the top. All right, here. I got off track. And I added this crystal one to the wrong end of my sequence here. Let me take that off. I think I set something when I lost you guys. I set one of my work mats on my keyboard, and it just, I don't know, just disconnected us. So hopefully we didn't lose too much. And when I'm choosing, I made the original design with 3 different colored crystals. And so when I was positioning them on the strands, I just kind of staggered them. The original design had a red and a kind of iridescent blue and the clear. And so I just kind of staggered them along and tried to mix them up so that I didn't end up with the same color next to each other. So although that's pretty close to, it doesn't matter. My point is I used 3 different colors, and I'm just arranging them how I think they look nice next to each other in the strands. Let's see, I'm at my bottom link. So now I want to use one of those crystals that's got the perpendicular loops, and that's so that my charm will hang facing forward. We have a lot of nice little charms that you can use for this. I pulled out just a couple when I was pulling out materials for the demo. I actually pulled up a link for you that will just pull up small charms. So if you want to look at some of our smaller charms, try that link. All right, so that is all 3 of my crystal strands. And then in between those crystal strands, when I start attaching these to the link, they'll be alternated. It'll be a crystal strand, chain, crystal strand, chain, crystal strand. And what are we doing? We're using these green bezels. And to attach the crystal strands, I can just open the loop on the other end of that, on the other end of the top crystal link. And then I have some very small jump rings somewhere to use for the chain, the little pieces of chain. And the chain pieces are 3 inches long. And they may need some trimming after everything's attached and we hang it up and see how it, hang them and see how they look. I may end up trimming that chain, but maybe not. We'll see how it looks. And another thing to watch for, of course, while you're attaching these is to make sure you're attaching them so the crystals are all facing forward. I'm really missing my bent nose pliers. I think I mentioned in last week's demo that my preferred combo when I'm working with jump rings or loops is a chain nose and a bent nose, and I lost my bent nose pliers when we were down in Tucson. So I really need to replace those because I missed them. All right, let's see how I did. Did I get everything attached facing forward? I did not, despite best efforts. The first one is backwards, or maybe that was the last one. But that's easy to fix. At the beginning of our demo, I was also talking about other resins that you could possibly use for this. I did try my UV resin, but UV resin is trickier when it comes to what you can mix it with. So I didn't really have anything that worked well with the UV resin. Another thing you can use is a dimensional adhesive, a clear drying water-based dimensional adhesive. We've had Judikins Diamond Glaze around the studio for a long time, which we sometimes use for things like that. So I have used that. I have an example somewhere. I have used that as well, and it is easier to mix stuff with. So I think I did this one with the dimensional adhesive. I'll show you guys these other variations when we're all done a little more, but you can use a dimensional adhesive as well. And I think I used the ultimate stain on that one too. So there's other things you can use. It doesn't have to be 2-part epoxy resin, but I felt like the 2-part epoxy resin would be the best. So the last thing I'm going to do is I have another one of these little crystal links. I need to open the loop more, that I'm going to attach at the top loop of that 5-to-1 link, and then open up the other side of it and attach our Reina earring post. You could, of course, use an ear wire with this, but when we were making these, we were going all in. So we wanted them to be splashy and fancy, and we went with the post to give it the most pizzazz that we could. So you can see that these 3-inch chains are maybe a teeny bit long, so I could trim a link off of each one of those maybe. And you could certainly use any fine chain that you have that you would want to use for this. I think taking off just one link makes that, makes that shape of everything at the bottom a little bit nicer. So, you guys, this is when you're trying to get the earrings to lay perfectly so that you can show them off the best. Sometimes they cooperate, sometimes they don't. This earring has a lot of steps and a lot of preparation, but you know, I think they're worth it. Oops, I tried to send you to give you guys a link, but it's telling me it didn't go, so let me try again. There we go. Hopefully, maybe that one show up. So there you go, you guys. I will make the second one so that we can post a picture later of this kind of very cool palette variation. I kind of like the way it came out. It's not quite the stained glass kind of like lots of vivid colors approach as the original pair, but I still think they're quite nice. And so I'll finish up. I'll do the second one and I'll post a picture of these later, so you can watch for that. And I did want to show, I have a bit of a frog in my throat. I did want to show a couple other variations we did with a chandelier idea with this component. When we went to Tucson, of course, we have to, if we want to share projects with the customers that come and visit us, we need them to be much more simple. So I did a much simplified variation of the stained glass idea, but I didn't use the resin because that would have just been kind of ridiculous down at a demo at a show. I omitted the resin. I simplified the dangles so that they were just a little bit of chain and a couple of bicones and a single crystal, but it's still a very pretty design. Matter of fact, I tend to be much more of a simple jewelry kind of person. I would definitely, me personally, I would wear this one before I wore that one. This one, it would have to be quite an occasion for me to wear those. I also, because we wanted to have options that really were going to be quicker and easier for people, I did a couple of suede lace kind of variations. So this was really fun. It's just, instead of this each strand being the chain and crystals and the charm, it was just a single little piece of suede lace, very fine suede lace with a lark's head knot. So I thought those ones came out really pretty too. If I ever do a second one of these, I will post a picture of those as well. And I think that's kind of all I got for you guys. These little 5-to-1 links, we are pretty excited about. It's been a long time since we did a component, since we released a new component like this. And I think it was overdue. We really needed some fresh multi-strand links. So pretty happy with these ones, and other people seem to be happy with them too. They're selling well and people are really liking them. These earrings are not the most cooperative I've ever worked with in terms of trying to get them to display nicely. So anyway, there you go, you guys. Big payoff for the prep. You're right, Deb. Debbie, which one were you wanting to see? Just all of them up closer? Again, in the on the project page on the website, you'll get clear up close pictures of these, and there's the downloadable project sheet too. So this one is really fun. I really do want to do a second one, so I have a pair of those, and I'll take a picture of those and share them maybe sometime soon. So Yeah, the suede is fun, huh, Carrie? So that's it, guys. I have to admit that I was a little bit nervous about. I've done videos with mixed media stuff, but two-part epoxy resin is not my usual thing. So I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. All I can do is do the best prep work I can and hope everything goes okay. So I hope it did. Thank you, you guys, for joining me. And I don't have anything specific planned for next week, but watch for that. I'm usually posting those on Fridays. I'm setting up the events for the next week's live stream on Friday, so you guys can watch for it on that day. And I'm also, just because I think this is always a good one to share, anybody who watches us regularly knows that we're a wholesale company. We don't sell retail, but so we like to give you guys the link to our store finder that's on our website so that you can look for retail sources for all this great stuff that I like to demo. So, all right, you guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. I hope that you have time to be creative and celebrate National Craft Month. That is something I have to remember. Whatever I decide to do a live stream, a demo for next week, I want to try and keep it on the craftier end. So we'll see what I can come up with. Bye. Have a great week. And thank you. We'll see you soon.